Psychotechnologies Live! Welcome to a special episode of Psychotechnologies Live. We have Youssy Mikhaeil, a trauma psychotherapist who specializes in trauma psychotherapy. So, Youssy, we were talking a little bit before about trauma, and you mentioned like some modalities that you do that you find useful, but like sometimes the modalities need to be done in certain ways, and it's actually a little more complex than just sort of plugging plugging programs into traumatic people and just letting them go. So we were talking that you have like a holistic or umbrella view of trauma or traumatic people, or therapy around trauma. Can you enlighten us a little bit? How do you see how this stuff works?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Daniel and Elliot, for inviting me along and having me on your platform. I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I enjoy talking to Elliot, and lovely meeting you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you guys asked some really good questions, and as far as trauma goes, so not many practitioners actually specialize in this area because it can be quite challenging, and you can't rely on a single modality or a single approach as far as treating different types of trauma, especially complex trauma. So I like to integrate different approaches depending on my understanding of trauma. And the way that I look at trauma is when a person is traumatized, or if they have been confronted by something that really taxed on their ability to cope with whatever event or whatever traumatic thing happened to them. Obviously, they get impacted by that on so many different levels. On a somatic level, which is the physical, on a cognitive level, which is the mental, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level as well, and on an existential level. And that's why I draw from so many different therapeutic approaches and modalities to be able to holistically address the impact of trauma, because trauma infiltrates people on so many different levels, because human beings are very complex. We have so many different dimensions to us. So existentially, for example, I use existential therapy to be able to address existential angst.
Right, so let me reflect back. Okay, so we started sort of like the way you're seeing this as a holistic or sort of overview ways that you're treating the person. You're not like, it seems like more like you're treating the person versus like the trauma per se. Where I see some people, they're like, oh, this trauma happened and we're gonna like find that trauma and we're gonna like deal with it, versus you're like, no, there's a person and they have, to like oversimplify a little bit, they got like a body, which what you're referring to as somatically. They got a heart, which is like emotionally. They got a mind, which is like the cognitively, and then you're having like spiritual and existential as well. And so you're looking at like all these different dimensions, and I guess like in working with them for them to, how would you say, like to manifest or to make it work, or to how would you describe what you do?
To be able to metabolize what happened and to get past it and move forward in life. Because a lot of people live in the freeze response, because freeze is actually a trauma response, as we were discussing earlier. So you have the fight, flight, and freeze. A lot of people describe being frozen in time because they haven't successfully metabolized or processed whatever happened to them. And so the task would be to process the traumatic event and then look at the impacts, the after effects, and then working with that, meeting people where they're at and helping them move forward past what happened to be able to manifest the future that they want. Because we don't want to be dictated by what happened to us. We want to be able to achieve a sense of management and a sense of control over our lives. And that's the saddest thing that happens when a person experiences trauma, because they experience also a loss of control.
That's, yeah. I don't know. I feel that when you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a little chills actually. I'm feeling a little bit of a freeze response right now.
I don't know. I reckon you got like a fawn response because you're laughing and smiling and like.
Oh yeah, this is my reaction to my freeze response. Is like like make you like me so that like I can like buy myself some time to unfreeze and
Stumped.
yeah.
It's very complex. I'll give you that.
Yeah, so I'm feeling things now. I feel like we've brought in trauma to the podcast now. Or maybe my own trauma is coming up. I don't know what's going on.
Over to you, Elliot. You can work
Elliot,
phenomenologically with Daniel right now to help him process the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super curious. Like, what are you feeling, Daniel?
There's like this tension, I guess. I get this like this response sometimes when I'm stressed or like I feel like people are staring at me, and I'm like I have this like I feel like I need to perform, but it's like not coming from inside. It's like coming from outside. It's like I need to almost, I think they call it like masking, almost like I need to put something out so you guys can look at the thing, and just to like move that attention away from me just for a moment, like there's a spotlight on me.
Yeah.
Which I feel like this is my fault because it's our podcast, and that's what I brought myself into.
Well, the other thing also I forgot to mention that I work with addictions, so substance abuse.
Oh.
Yeah, that's another area that I specialize in, which I forgot to mention. Yeah, so I look at like drugs, alcohol, and obviously different mental health diagnoses that I can address in my private practice.
Okay, that's cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know I have some friends that are, like the addicts are like fun people, you know. Maybe not. Maybe this isn't from the therapy side, from the ground level, the grassroots side. Yeah, I have a bunch of friends. They don't let me go to their meetings though because I don't have a history of addiction. So like they're hanging out with all their friends, doing the therapy, and I want to go, but they don't really like me.
Not actually addictive personality, just like in therapy methods, and they don't let you in. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a spectacle either.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Private therapy is private therapy.
Yeah, I want to respect their space and stuff. Okay, so I guess we can just sort of use me as an example. So I have I'm having this little bit of like freeze fawn response. How would you typically, or how would you help me work through that? What do
you do with people when they're like, what do you do with people when they're like frozen and then just start laughing in front of you in therapy? Like, how do you oh, I can tell laughter here is not quite what I was expecting.
Well, look, I think let's not pathologize Daniel's response or reaction too much, because obviously there is context, and it takes about 10 sessions minimum. So I'm kidding. See, I'm also laughing.
I see how you're trying to get yourself invited on to the next one.
Of course, yeah, it's work in progress.
You're like, guys, I need to come here 9 more times. That's how it works.
Yes. A minimum of 10 sessions. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, speaking of sessions, they actually cut Medicare sessions from 20 back to 10, which is quite sad.
The Australian government just changed the medically government-supported sessions from 20 to 10, right?
Yeah, which is kind of like a backward step. So everybody's disappointed about that. But anyway, that's kind of like irrelevant. But in terms of the fawn response, fawn is actually quite different because it's shape-shifting, it's people-pleasing, and it's not just about making other people happy. Normally that happens at the person's expense. So whilst you're going out of your way, bending over backwards to make sure that everybody else is happy with you and that they're content, you're actually self-sacrificing, but not in a healthy way. So I don't think this is fawn. I think it's just the pressure of, it's kind of like performance anxiety, which is warranted. It's fine. It's okay. So I just want to normalize that. Let's not apologize it too much.
Okay, I appreciate that.
That's so interesting. You paint like a dark picture of fawn. Like I'm like, oh, I don't like fawn anymore. I'm like, yeah. Like I mean, having sat in therapeutic spaces for long enough, I know my habitual response is freeze fawn as well. This is what I do. I do nothing and then I play nice. I like make good. I like happy. But like the way you point it is, you describe it as shape shifting, like, and that's really interesting. So I have a something I've been playing with in the last month or two is this frustration around being seen and being met, where I often don't feel seen or met, which suddenly fits like a glove around the sense of freeze fawn, because obviously I'm playing nice and you describe it as shape shifting. I'm like, oh, that fits perfectly. I'm a shapeshifter, and that's why people can't quite see me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I like, oh, sorry. I like that you're like reframing this fawn. It's like, it's not that you're being nice or friendly or trying to connect to the other person or get them to like you. It's that you're like contorting yourself into ways that are like unhealthy or bad or negative or hurtful for you. And like, that's what makes it fawning versus, I guess, just like trying to connect to another person.
Yes. Yeah. Or just doing the emotional labor in a conversation. Fawn is actually, so it's not very well understood, because so if we bring it back to the initial fight, flight, or freeze, we actually got our knowledge or understanding of that from animals, from experimenting on animals, sadly, by inflicting pain on them and observing how they behave when they're cornered, caught in a corner, or being tortured or having pain inflicted on them, and then observing their physiological bodily responses,
traumatizing them, and then seeing what do those behaviors look like after we traumatize them.
Exactly right, which sounds really cruel, but that's how we kind of extrapolated that kind of knowledge, and then we automatically applied that to human beings, obviously drawing similarities in terms of the nervous system responses to trauma. However, fawn is very exclusive to human beings, because animals don't do that as a coping mechanism, as a way to survive. It's a survival thing, first and foremost. Understanding it in terms of survival, if you did not contort yourself, if you didn't shapeshift, then obviously you would have risked abandonment and rejection. And this is something that gets conditioned, or people get conditioned to fawn from such a young age. And kids can't survive. Children are so vulnerable, and they can't survive without being looked after and having that adult attention and love and care. So that's how it originated. And it's so interesting, Elliot, that you say that. You feel like people can't see you and they can't meet you where you're at, because we don't. When you don't show the real you, quite often it's not just about showing that, but it's also about knowing the real you. No one else will be able to tell, okay, so which version of Elliot is the real Elliot, if you get where I'm coming from.
Right. I mean, my journey through various modalities has also included picking up attunement as a really important skill. Like my ability to tune into other people's bodies and where they're at and how they feel and like what's going on externally, but also more importantly, internally. That was like a huge part of my journey, was going down that path, meeting my discovery that, oh, I feel misattuned to, and then picking up that skill really strongly. And so that I can maintain attunement. That's really been like, these pieces fit together quite nicely. But of course, I lean into fawn to do that, like to make nice, get to know people really well, like deeply understand them, so that I can feel safe, right, in my environment, so that I can keep myself safe by knowing what's going on for other people.
Yes, yeah, it's seeking connection, because it fosters safety for you.
Yeah, and growth. I find a lot often like I'm like, I need to like interact with this person in this way, so that I can just learn how to do that. Right, because like we learn so much from other people, we don't rediscover every piece of our culture, everything that's important, every time. Like we have to like get that sort of information transmitted.
So I have a question leading from this for Youssy. When you meet a new client potentially, they may be showing up with a fawn, a freeze, or like all of these patterns at the get-go, or even like even on the other layers, like their body, maybe they're not exercising their body or keeping their body healthy, or they're like their cognition is in a like weird way. They're like they're in a particular configuration that's kind of like not their best self potentially, or like kind of confused themselves. How do you, I guess I'm doing the like the hands thing, like a containering, holding, how do you hold them knowing that they're actually, there's more to them, but they're showing up in this like screwed up, trying to hold themselves together, like scared of things over their shoulder. Like, how do you hold them in such a way that knowing that there'll be more without knowing what that more is? Because you're not going to know if they're like creative but not showing it, right? How do you hold them with enough space for them to like stretch back out into the space?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question, actually. I think how I do it, I just accept them as they are. So the minute they walk through the door, and that's what I'm seeing, what I'm observing about them, I take people as they come. Yes, I do see potential, and I have a bit of an understanding as to why a person is the way that they are right here, right now. But, I don't have an agenda. So when I meet somebody new and they come in therapy with me, I can see that that's how they are. That's where they're at. So it's all about meeting people where they're at along their journey without an agenda. Even if you see potential for them, it's about them setting therapeutic goals for themselves. And I'm much like you and Daniel are doing right now. I'm a facilitator of growth, which means if there's potential for this person to evolve and develop into a better version of themselves, okay, well, let's work on that, as long as we're clear that this is the goal that you want to pursue. This is why you've come to me. This is what you want to pursue in therapy. And I'm here to facilitate that journey for you, because I'm also person-centered in my approach. I don't set specific agendas for clients. I let them do that for themselves. And sometimes I help them clarify where they want to get or where they want to be in time. But in terms of holding them, I think you do that through acceptance and just being non-judgmental when you meet somebody new. And so I'm very also Rogerian in my approach, which it's all about being congruent with the person, with the client, and holding that unconditional positive regard, even if they're self-loathing, even if they carry a lot of shame, because quite often shame and trauma, they go hand in hand. But it's accepting and being accepting and being non-judgmental.
I guess I'm thinking like a crumpled piece of paper, right? It's all like scrunched up into a ball because someone's psyche has crumpled themselves up to protect themselves. Like, I'm not going to let out my shining bright light of brilliance because I got stepped on a bunch of times. So I'm a crumpled ball. And then like, as I start to unravel, like straighten out the paper, like it starts to be clearer. Like, do you, like, if the paper's not fully uncrumpled, do you be like, stay here, you need more therapy? Or do you let them, they're like, I'm good. You're like, haha, what about your blind spots? Like, do you let people go, or do you encourage them to like really uncrumple further? Like, how do you balance that?
I can paint a picture for them in terms of where they're at and where they can be in time. So that's when I shed some light on what therapy can do for them and what they can achieve through it. Because most of the time, clients, so I see that people sometimes, we all have that innate drive to get better. I believe that we all have a drive to get well and to be the best version of ourselves. Some people have more of a stronger inner drive for growth and evolution or evolvement. Other people, they have that drive, but not as strongly. So my job is to actually let them know what they can achieve in therapy and just let that unfold. let them unravel organically. I trust the process a lot, but I don't push people because everyone has their own pace, and I have to respect their pace. Some people achieve it in 97 sessions. Other people achieve it in 12 sessions. Other people do it in 6 months. And it's not just me straightening out or ironing out the kinks in that paper. I like that, by the way. That analogy is such a good visual because it feels that way sometimes, and I can see that. But I trust the process enough and what I'm doing to be able to, for the kinks to be ironed out in time at the client's pace.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really nice. Like, it's like, I think people who haven't been to therapy are seeing it as like, okay, I'm a paper and somebody's going to uncrumple me and iron me. And like, I don't necessarily, I think that's like one of the barriers where it's maybe I don't trust them to have the same origami image as I do. And so you're like, almost, instead of like doing that, you're seeing them come in as a paper, as a shape, right? Because if it's non-judgmental, then you're not, you know, it's crumpled, or it's its own shape, and like the person is trying to I guess unravel themselves, or to readjust, or to grow, or to move on, just as all people, you know, as all living beings like to do. It's interesting. I like, just like a sort of a little more technical question, I guess, maybe. When you're like, when they show up, like they're showing up, let's say with this fawning, where they're contorting themselves to try to meet what they think your image is of what you want to see. And if you're accepting them as they are, then like, doesn't that get confusing, where you're accepting this like contorted image, but like that's not really who they are, and like sort of having the struggle of like finding the real self versus the presenting self. How do you navigate that? How does that work? Like, tell us about that.
You know what, Daniel, you will be very surprised once somebody feels seen and heard and met and acknowledged. They will start to bloom. So I know it sounds a bit paradoxical that if I accept them in their current state, well, how is that going to propel change? How is it going to propel their growth if I just take them as they come in that contorted, scrunched up state? But you will be so pleasantly surprised. I get surprised every single time. I promise you this. It is so surprising. It's very illuminating. I don't even know how to describe it, but acceptance actually facilitates change, because growth is painful, right? Change is not easy. Change is actually quite painful because it involves a lot of grief work. So you actually grieve as you change, and you grieve as you grow. And not many people know that. And that's why change is very complicated. It's not a straightforward process. It's not linear. It's very convoluted without making it sound too scary. But the minute that's I know, like, I don't want to.
I like how you're trying to balance all these narratives together to like thread that needle of like
I know, like, I don't want to put you off of change, because I know that change can be really scary, and change happens in stages also, like 6 stages of change, right? But the minute you provide the right conditions and the right environment, people start to bloom, and it all starts with acceptance. Because it's like accepting what you can't change, but also changing what you can simultaneously, whilst grieving that version of yourself that you're letting go of. So every stage of change will involve a different version of you, and as you progress, there will be a lot of grieving tasks involved in grieving the previous version of yourself and how that was formed and how that came about. Whilst embracing the unknown, and the unknown can be quite scary.
Yeah, that's a nice, like, you're saying the words, and then like I'm getting these images in my mind, and like memories of past stuff. I'm really
Interesting.
Not therapy sessions, the psychotech session. Very different. But yeah, like it's like there is this like grief of like I guess like, yeah, that's what you're doing. If you're accepting this person, then the person can accept themselves, and then they can let go of like the images or the things that they were holding on to that aren't serving them now, I guess, and letting them grow.
Exactly right. And it normalizes that it's okay if I'm going to be different, then different is good. Different is not bad. I'm going to embrace different now because I'm going to show up, and I know that my therapist will take me as I am at any given point in time. So why can't I do that for myself? You're exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about if you're growing as well. Like you sit there watching them going through this like uncrumpling. Are you also some uncrumpling or something?
100%, Elliot. This kind of work changes you. If you don't change with it, then something is not right.
It's like a growth environment, so you should be growing as well.
Yes. If I start stagnating, I stop becoming effective. So I can only take people as far as I have gone myself in my own personal journey of growth and development. So it's not just, people think it's professional development, but no, if you really want to become the most effective therapist you can be, you have to grow with the process and be open enough to allow it to change you for the better in time or over time. And that's why I love it so much. Like, you can tell I'm so passionate about my work, because it's actually, I'm not the same person that I was when I started my private practice or when I started counseling 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super really interested in this.
Like your face starts shining when we do stuff.
I'm super interested in well, I called it coachability, but because I'm working the coaching, not the therapy domain, but it's the similar thing. I was curious around, like, I was finding myself suddenly not very coachable. Like, I didn't like working with a bunch of people. And I was battling like, oh, there's something I need to do to be more helpable. You know, this ties back into what we're saying about fawn and attunement. They're like, I'm the global helper, right? I am the helper that doesn't need help, kind of. I got a lot of that going on. So the like, there's a skill of being able to be helped. And that's one that I'm super interested in terms of like, if you want to be growing, you've got to be open to help. Is there like I'm kind of like stuck on the skills, like what are the skills I need to help me receive help better, or to work with, make myself more open to be worked with, and maybe trust more practitioners or something. I'm like, I don't know what the skills are. Like, how do you, like you say you're growing in front of your clients all the time as well. How do you like be more open? I assume you've also got your own therapeutic relationships that you're supervised or whatever.
Yeah. So apart from clinical supervision, I think clinical supervision is such a good space to reflect on who you are as a therapist, who I am as a practitioner, not just in terms of client cases or presenting cases, but also in terms of what's coming up for me as a person and as a professional, and how that might be actually help or hindrance as far as my work with clients go. But apart from the clinical supervision space, where I have a clinical supervisor that helps me reflect on myself, I've been in therapy myself, guys. I've been in therapy a couple of times in my life. So I myself was a client at various points in life because I needed help. And I found it very beneficial, tremendously beneficial, actually, because it helped me navigate the challenges that I had back then in life. But at the same time, it gives you that understanding of what it's like to be on the receiving end of therapy and being in that vulnerable state of being a client yourself. And and just receiving help and what that looks like and how it feels and how valuable it can be, but at the same time, how empowering or disempowering that can be also in lots of different ways.
So is there like a skill of being able to work with a therapist? Like I guess this is now from the client side, any client side. How does a client be, I want to be cautious here using the word a good client, because we also don't want them like fawning to you and being like, I'm the best client, I'm going to show up all healthy and successful, and you just have to sit there for an hour having
and then you have to
pretend like they have a perfect life, even though
thing.
they're coming to see you for something that they come and see you, right? They're like, I live a perfect life, I don't need any therapy. You're like, okay. Like, how does someone actually be a better client?
Yeah, I like to say, yeah, that's a better way of asking the question, I guess. So I'm very cautious or wary of using terms like good and bad, like very binary, descriptive terms, because there's no such thing as a good or a bad person. You know, good people do bad things, and bad people are not necessarily inherently bad, if you know where I'm coming from. But I guess a person or a client that I like to work with is someone who's ready. So a good client is someone who's ready to change. And we know that, as I mentioned before, there are different stages of change. You have the pre-contemplative stage, when people are usually like in denial about what needs to happen, or what the nature of the issue is, or the fact that they need to change something about themselves or their life. But then you have the contemplative stage, when people are actually contemplating and realizing that, hang on a second, I think something is not quite right here, and I need to address this, or I need to look into that further. So when clients present at the contemplative or the contemplation stage, that's when they are ready to embark upon a journey of change, and that's when it's easier to work with them. I'm not saying that it's not, or I can't work with someone who's pre-contemplated. No, you can, and there are specific skill sets and techniques that you can use. So things like motivational interviewing that you can do with them to help move them along and away from ambivalence. But a good client is a ready client, someone who's already thinking about what they want, someone who's not happy with the status quo in their lives, the direction that their life is taking, and who has the desire and is open enough, so open and willing and ready. I think that's what makes a client a good client to work with, good to work with.
I have this phrase, not suffering enough, which is, you know, you don't like your life, but it's all right. Like, you know, that's like, you're not suffering enough. You're not ready for therapy because you're not suffering enough. And there's some like, I mention this because it's really uncomfortable territory to be like, come back to me when you're really miserable. You know, come back to me when you're ready to actually like, I'm sick of this problem and I want to change.
You know, you're not that far off actually, Elliot, because especially in the addiction field.
Right.
I don't want this to be
hitting the bottom, but it's not really rock bottom yet, right?
Well, sometimes, yes, they have to hit rock bottom for them to finally be confronted by their reality, for them to be able to actually want to do something about it. So things are bad, but they're not bad enough yet.
Yeah, I mean, terrifying. And there are probably ways in my life in which I haven't realized that they're bad enough yet as well. Like, I'm avoiding change because I'm like, not bad enough yet. I could live with this.
Yeah. Same with toothache. I am guilty of that too. So it's kind of like, okay, once I can't sleep anymore from the pain, that's when I'll go see the dentist.
Right. Not suffering enough. Terrifying.
Yeah. No, I get the concept. Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, like, here I am in my like comfortable armchair going like, oh, it's not so bad. The fire, like, my house is on fire, but it's not hot enough yet. And I'm like, wait a second. Am I deliberately waiting for my house to be like more on fire than it currently is? Like, why am I willing to go down the path of like, oh, I need to be suffering more before I address this?
Yeah, like how does this happen? What are the conditions where people are willing to like put up with so much misery or negativity in their life before they're able to like, I guess, like hit that action potential to move?
Yeah. So this is a bit multi-layered. I want to come back to what Elliot said, that analogy of the house on fire. So your house is burning down, right? And you're just sitting in your armchair, and you're hearing
warm in here.
Alarm.
There's this noisy thing going beep beep beep. Yep, smoke alarm. Like,
yeah, it's going crazy. Like it's just
turn up the volume on the TV so I can hear it better because there's a thing beeping at me. Like,
yep. And the fire brigade is outside, and everybody's fleeing the burning house, and people are yelling at you, Elliot, get the hell out, Elliot.
Elliot, quit your drinking. Like,
yeah, you're not gonna survive this, but you're sitting there still not wanting to take action. And that can be because of a lot of things. First and foremost, it's fear of change. And fear of change goes hand in hand with fear of the unknown. And also, what's keeping you stuck? So that's another internal thing to look at. What's keeping you stuck?
Like, what's the payoff? Like, if I get to sit here in my house, I get to complain to everyone about how hot my house is. But I haven't left the flaming building yet. I'm just complaining about it. And there's some payoff there. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. And that's why a lot of people can't let go of certain narratives, like trauma narratives or victim narratives, because they get a lot of payoffs.
Right, like trauma sympathy. If I keep complaining about how I was abused, then I get a lot of sympathy from people about the thing that I have survived. And therefore there was Caroline Myss had a book in which she talked about incest survivors group, like a group that meets regularly and talks about being survivors of incest. And there's a identity that can form around that and have people go like, you wouldn't understand, you haven't survived, right? And yet this small group of people who have survived, they're my like new family who completely understand and aren't abusing me, and like I'm actually very happy in my little bubble. But if I want to actually grow, transform, and heal, I need to break my bubble and like leave my little comfortable little place where there are these people who say it's okay, you're a survivor. I need to like break that in order to grow up and be like, I'm just a human again. Like,
correct. Yeah, definitely. And other people come into it in terms of how they perceive you, but it's also what you say to yourself about yourself. So your own sense of identity that you've formed in that narrative, how you perceive yourself as a victim or victim of circumstance, or
right,
in general.
It's everyone else's fault that I'm not more successful in life, or it's the fault of my childhood that I'm not more successful in life, and therefore I get to blame someone and be miserable and keep my misery. And forever be resentful.
Yeah. And so that will affect your intrinsic motivation to change. Your internal motivation to change. Daniel, okay, before I say the next point, I noticed you want to say something.
No, keep going. I'm enjoying this like dialogue you guys are having.
Okay. I was just going to mention one more thing. Sometimes it's not just about the narrative and the payoffs, but also when we become traumatized, trauma robs us of our sense of agency. And without enough sense of agency, we won't be able to take action. So we may be ready for change on some levels, like on a mental or an emotional level. But as far as feeling that we are our own agents.
Right. Like, I know I should quit smoking, but I just keep doing it.
Yeah, because I don't have enough sense of agency yet. I feel incredibly disempowered, that it's one of the things that's keeping me stuck, because I don't have enough energy or enough motivation to take action or to actually embark upon a journey where I can actually do something about myself and my circumstances and my reality. So it can be quite real that if a person is really disempowered, they lack the agency to be able to take action in the right direction. So it's a combination of a lot of factors, internal and external.
Mm.
It could be that perhaps, so back to your visual analogy of sitting in a burning house, it could be that maybe you've injured your leg. You can't walk.
Right. Everyone's like, get out of the house. And you're like, well, I can't anyway.
Yeah, I can't. And that's why I'm stuck. And the people around you, they're very well intentioned. Like I see people in therapy that tell me, look, I'm here because my wife wants me to talk to you, or my parents sent me. Everybody around me thinks that I need therapy, but I don't see the point in it. So it could be that the person is really, really stuck for different reasons.
I mean, that also makes a lot of sense. Like, there's a guy sitting in the chair in the burning down house, and the fire department's like, get out of your house. And he's like, but I can't. Don't you understand? I can't. And obviously, they can't see his broken leg, and he doesn't know how to get out of the building with a broken leg. Like, that's like the tragedy of our times.
Yeah, it seems like there's also this element of like they don't necessarily realize that their leg is broken, or like there's some sort of denial, or the way that they're coping with the pain is sort of, you know, maybe like dissociating or blocking it.
Pain. That, which shows that pain actually serves a very good purpose. Because if you don't feel the pain, you will not be propelled forward. You will not heal what you won't feel. And that's why growth, as I said, growth is painful, because it will involve a great deal of painful emotions.
So it's almost like pre-therapy, like pre-therapy, like if we wanted to do something to make people ready for it, it would be like, come join us, and when you leave, you'll be in a lot of pain.
See, I also think about like some of the crazy wisdom stuff in cults, that the cult is like, they are maybe known for traumatizing people a bit, or like, but unfortunately, sometimes that really helps people grow. Like some of these crazy cults, that's how they do it, right? They sleep deprive you, they like get you miserable, and then they're like, and that's when you even something like Tony Robbins, where they put you under pressure. They keep you in the program for hours and hours and hours, and they like, that can cause transformative change. There's what's the book, Post-Traumatic Growth by Dabrowski. He was a psychologist of the 70s, and he noticed that for some of the people around him, stuff would happen to them, and then they would like fall apart and break down and be traumatized, PTSD, that sort of thing. And for other people, something would happen to them, and then they would transform and change and grow. And there was something really good after, like, that he called the post-traumatic growth. And he tried to develop a psychology of how do we get that one instead of the bad one. Yeah, because the like really good things often happen when there's a breakdown, right? When I realize that my coping strategies aren't working is when I need to like develop new methods and find a new way to live in the world.
Okay, I'm going to sidestep this one because I can't comment on pop psychology, but it sounds really terrifying actually, from not just my perspective as a therapist, but as a person, as a human being. I don't want to have to go through that, because I'm a big believer in safety and supportive challenging. So I don't believe in confrontation, or so confrontation is very old school therapy, much like graded exposure therapy, where you rub the trauma in the person's face.
Doesn't sound very nice.
No, it's not, and it's not very safe either, and it doesn't really help with brain rewiring. If you believe in neuroplasticity and rewiring the brain and helping the brain heal and form new neural pathways that will take you to wellness and health, there is no point in rehashing the distressing details or distressing stuff, because that just reinforces.
the opposite method would would be something like exposure therapy, right? That we gently, you're terrified of spiders, right? So you come to the session, first session, there's a picture of the spider, but it's on the other side of the room until you're like really comfortable to like be with it, and then we move it closer until you can actually hold the picture, right? And then there's like a video of the spider, and again we start with it like far away, and then until you get really comfortable. Like this could take days, hours, weeks until you can like sort of be present to the video and like watch the video and not like dissociate or run away. And then we can do a real spider in a tank on the other side of the room. And then like until you are safe and comfortable to move close enough to it. This is like gradual, very gentle exposure therapy, right? There's no rubbing your trauma in your face. There's like inch by inch.
I think that can be a bit effective in the case of phobias or irrational fears, but as far as PTSD and trauma goes, that's embedded in real life, it's actually quite ineffective. And I've seen that happen. So I work with a lot of ex-cops, ex-military. I also work with moral and psychological injuries as far as work cover or workers' compensation scheme goes. So if it's actually embedded in real life, it's kind of like that horrible event has already happened in real life. Graded exposure therapy lets a lot of people down in that context. But as far as fears and phobias go, it can work with that kind of presentation. But not with trauma.
I have a general rule that certain types of therapy apply to certain types of stuff. Like the psychological stuff we're working with will work better with certain types of therapy and not with others.
I
think totally makes sense to me.
Yes. So because that person lost their sense of safety, they don't feel safe in themselves and they don't feel safe in the world either. So trauma changes your perception and your worldview of the world into a completely negative one. Right. So safety becomes paramount. So back to Tony Robbins. Again, I'm not going to comment on that or what he does because I'm not even slightly or remotely interested in that kind of work.
I have to also claim no exposure. I've never actually done any of his programs. So it's like, it's a bit of a cheap shot to like attack a thing that I don't actually have enough exposure to.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to attack him either. So I reserve my comments because I don't know enough. And at the same time, I'm not motivated to know enough. If that makes any sense.
You haven't felt the pain of not knowing Tony Robbins.
Not suffering enough. Make it a good way. That's interesting that there might be a good way to be not suffering enough as well.
Yeah, well, suffering enough. I think pain can be really confronting, and that's why I wouldn't dismiss pain. There was a saying that I came across. It goes, the entire philosophy of Western medicine is based on the idea of getting rid of pain. But we actually underestimate and undervalue the purpose and the role that pain serves in our lives and in our development.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
I mean, yeah, I think like we also have the dark side of that, like the shadow side of that, where the no pain, no gain, and like work is supposed to be hard and painful and all that stuff. So I think we tend to reserve the pain for like work or something, and then in medicine or like in self-growth or in ourselves, we look at pain as this thing to get rid of. So it's like we've almost like misplaced like where how our relationship with pain is almost like this like we flipped it on its head, or we like twisted it in some way.
I mean, I'm the kind of person who doesn't even take a Panadol, like a paracetamol. Like I'm like, I don't even like those medications. That like I have a headache, take a little thing. Like I had COVID and I lied in bed. This is like a week or two ago. I didn't take any medications to help. I just went through it. I think of actually a lot of bodily sensation experience as I really like the metaphor of alarm clocks. Like a lot of pain is like an alarm clock, and what we do is we then ignore the alarm clocks, and they're like the alarm, like the smoke alarm, right? It's going off, but I'm ignoring it. And the correct thing to do with pain is not to ignore it, not to move away from it, distract from it, but to move towards it. And that on the like somatic experiential level seems to turn off the alarms.
Yes.
And then instead of like, probably by the time you're hearing this message, there's like a giant cluster of pain, right? And it's not alarm clock anymore, it's like 20 alarm clocks. And so moving towards it is gonna feel hard and gonna feel overwhelming. But then, as in my experience of every time I move towards a painful phenomena, I like turn off the alarm clock, and then I turn off the next alarm clock, and then like maybe an hour later I've turned off all the alarm clocks, and it's not painful anymore because I've turned off many of the, like, yeah, I know that my body needs to recover. And in lying in bed and like staying with it, meditating with it, and turning off a bunch of alarm clocks, suddenly I feel better because there aren't a bunch of alarm clocks going off. So, I mean, that's kind of like my relationship with pain, but I know that many people aren't ready for that. Because like, I'm like, good news, pay more attention to your pain. The first thing that's going to happen is it gets worse, right? It gets louder, it gets more uncomfortable, it gets more painful. And like, fair enough, most people think psychologically they're not able to handle such a pain.
Yes.
And also, I have every confidence that your psyche can actually handle it. This is like a universal proposal. Like, there's something like, maybe I should be really cautious about saying this, but a psyche cannot deliver itself more pain than it can handle. Because we're talking about our sensors, like our physical sensors in the world, and their ability to report information back to our information receiving system. It can be full on, it can be as strong as an experience that there is nothing else happening but that painful phenomena, but it can't actually overload the receiving system because those systems are intertwined in relation to each other. So much as it feels like it's going to be the most horrible thing, moving towards pain will actually have you discover that the pain can only be as much as you can receive. Like, those things will meet each other, and then like they'll like turn down the volume and you'll be much better after that. But scary journey to suggest people to go down.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And that's why pacing is of the essence, I think. So getting to know the pain and getting that pain in small doses, that's another thing that I'm mindful of during the therapeutic or in the therapeutic process. But I like your take on it, Elliot, because quite often pain is not the primary issue. It's a symptom of a deeper issue.
Right. If I've had like a chronically bad posture and now I have a sciatica, like the pain isn't the problem, right? The chronically bad posture is the problem that caused the pain. And the only way I'm going to fix the chronically bad posture is if I pay a lot of attention to the pain and move towards it. And then I realize that the posture is me and I can change the posture and then solve the damn problem. Correct.
Same principle applies to emotional pain.
Absolutely. It's easier to feel with physical pain because it's so obvious, but emotional pain, absolutely the same. And the worst part is it feels harder.
Yes. Yes.
And this is something I'm really fascinated by. We have this like model of how the world works from the physical world. Like, if I walk in front of a car, I'll get hit by the car and break my leg, right? So like, there's physical danger and physical pain in the physical world. But then as soon as we move to the emotional territory, we're no longer in a landscape of physical danger. We're in this like emotional landscape. And there's emotional danger. Like, what if that memory comes up and attacks me, or like hits me, or intrudes on my present experience? But the quality of physical danger doesn't exist in that subtle territory. I can't actually break my leg of happiness, right? I can get sad, but I can't actually injure my happiness in such a way that I can't have it later. But there's this like belief that I could. And so there's this fear of traveling through the emotional territory, that it'll be like the physical territory and I can actually injure myself in the emotional territory in the same way I can injure it in the physical territory. But we can't. We can just get very uncomfortable and worried about other bits of that, like emotionally, relationship to the other bits of the emotional territory. I can be very scared about going into that memory but it's not physical danger, it's emotional fear of other things that are in my psyche.
You've just successfully described the nature of intrusive thoughts and flashbacks and intrusions. Yeah. And that's why they are so damn scary, because it's an uncharted territory. And the word that came to my mind was familiarity. Emotional pain is not the most familiar. We are very accustomed to physical pain. We know how to describe it. We have the right terms to even gauge it and quantify it. But as far as emotional pain and anguish, turmoil, and suffering, emotional suffering goes, we're grappling with the terminology to even describe it, let alone come to terms with it and get to know it.
I mean, I also think it's the fault of our language. We don't have words to describe the thing that is move towards fear, move away from fear. We have like approximate words, but we're kind of like, very quickly we start using metaphors. We start using language from the physical world, like move towards. What is the move? Like in physical world, when I move towards, I take a step forward and walk towards it. What is that movement? What is the thing in the emotional territory in terms of move towards emotion, like fear? We'll move towards the fear. Like what? How?
Yep.
Like,
yes.
I would be like disappointed if a client never said to me, how do I move towards fear? Right? Because many people can just take that instruction and be like, oh, I'll just move towards the fear. Like as you described, oh, it's as I move towards it, it gets harder and then it becomes tolerable. But other people are like, what do you mean move towards fear? What's that? Like, what is that? Like, it's not like I can move my legs to do it. Like, how do I move towards fear? And like, rightly so. And then I have to sit here and go like, how do I describe? How do I point people in the direction and move towards your fear? Like, is it like, try this? I do a try this, like a try think of things that make you scared and repeat those memories, right? That's a little exercise that will maybe sometimes work to move people towards their fear. But sometimes that doesn't work. Like, how does someone move towards their fear?
Get acquainted with rejection. Get acquainted with abandonment. How do I get to know that? Well, hence the use of metaphors and analogies.
Right. It's such a weird territory. Like, on the one hand, it feels like there's a landscape, but on the other hand, it's not like here, right? If I'm like, go find your most abandonment memory, like, what is the action of going finding? Like, what is this instruction that I'm inviting people to do?
Yeah.
And yet it is an instruction. Like, some people can just do it.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you remember your HSC higher school certificate English.
I remember.
they had this whole concept of journeys. So it was a theme. And then you have the physical journey, but then you have the internal journey. So it's kind of like an emotional journey or a mental journey. And you're taking steps through introspection, journaling, reflection, sitting with the physical manifestation of non-tangible experiences. Because having an emotion like fear, for example, it's actually an all-encompassing experience. A feeling is actually an emotional experience because it involves a lot of mental processes plus physical sensations. And so if you really want to make it tangible for clients, I always look for physical cues in terms of physical sensations of fear, and just sitting with that and getting to know the physical sensations. And that will lead to much, much deeper emotional and mental insights.
That's like the somatic processing. And then
absolutely. I think after journeys, this is end of high school English, like graduating high school. After journeys, there was belonging, like they changed the syllabus, and after that, I think they had like story or something. So like same themes through them, but like they still get high school students to finish off their English with that quality of like, how do I embody experience in language?
Yes. So it's kind of like the pursuit of language. You're right, because English is kind of like linguistics. And we're constantly looking for the right tools to describe such elusive internal experiences. And that's why they taught it in high school, because we're trying to capture non-capturable. Yeah, I just made that up.
Ineffable, I think we call it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm really frustrated by high school because I was not in a place to understand English, like literature analysis. There clearly were people who were, but I was a scientist. I was in mathematics. I was into the math, and I was having to do this, like, write an essay about this book, and I'm like, I don't care. This is not. I'm just not in this place right now. I'm in that other place over there, in the science and the math, and the like. And I wish someone in high school had come to me and gone, like, that's okay. Like, some people are more mathy and other people are more wordy, and like, don't worry too hard about it because there's success in the world in either of these domains, and you don't need both of them. But oh man, what a battle high school was, doing subjects I didn't excel at, couldn't understand why they mattered. And now I understand, like 10 years later, I was like, oh, literary analysis, of course, symbolic, extracting symbols from texts and going deep into why they're there. Like that, now it's super interesting. Archetypes, Jungian psychology, like huge to me. Back then I was like, why does it matter that I belong? Like, who cares? I want to do math.
I think, Daniel, if I'm not mistaken, I think Elliot has been triggered.
Good. I didn't notice that.
Maybe like what, when I start ranting about things is when I'm triggered. Like, yeah, all right. Yes.
Okay. I was being cheeky, not necessarily therapeutic.
I mean, it's true.
I really like the notion though of describing things by proxy.
By like metaphor? Or
yeah.
And that's like an avoidance, I guess, like kind of like an avoidance technique to not talk about the thing directly, but to talk around it.
Yes, but also in a good way, because there's an appropriate distance, right? And this is something I've been thinking about for a while as well, that like to turn off the alarm clocks directly while they're screaming at you might be difficult, but to like try and find a distance at which you can like reach out carefully and turn them off may be a really supportive endeavor. Like reading fiction about someone else's similar experience can be something that can like help you stay with yours or process yours. That's why people, I suspect, like soap opera dramas on TV, like, because there's all these emotions and they're like swimming in them constantly. And then you watch them, you're like, oh, me too. I'm like swimming in my emotions. Like,
it facilitates access to feelings. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what that does. But I also quickly on the notion of safety, accessing pain and processing pain, I think, should happen in a supportive environment. So the role of support, or having the appropriate support when you're dealing with or confronting emotional pain, I think it's paramount. Like I can't stress this enough, that you have to do it in a supportive environment and you have to do it safely. Do you guys mind if I plug my charger very quickly because my battery's dying? 2 seconds.
Yep. How you doing, Daniel?
Huh?
How you doing?
It's I don't know. It's interesting. It's
we're at some level of intensity here in this conversation.
Yeah. I'm having trouble following it for some reason.
Yeah. Have we like given you flashbacks into something?
Maybe. I don't know. Like it's like I'm like tuning in and out. Like when I jump up, when I hear like the therapy stuff more, and then I don't know, maybe it's like Australian vibes, like you guys are vibing, and I'm just like, it's like a different culture, and I'm like not.
I mean, that's a super interesting question for Youssy. Do different cultures seem to have different patterns towards in relationship to their traumas? Like, do different cultures hold them differently, or like expect different things of themselves as you work with people from different cultures?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, actually, you ask a lot of good questions. All of your questions are good, I have to say.
This is my job. I sit here and I interview people. My job is to ask good questions.
Yes, and you're good at it. I think, look, definitely there is a lot of work in therapy that I do in terms of working through layers of cultural conditioning around trauma and around suffering. However, there are certain truths that I found to be a bit universal in terms of how people relate to their traumas. So it could be like the denial stage, for example, because trauma and grief are very closely associated. So when we do work around trauma and processing traumatic things, there's a lot of grief involved in grieving. And so we do grief work as well. And, you know, one of the stages of grief is denial. So denial can show up and can be disguised, or it can take on different cultural guises, if that makes any sense. So you get to work through that layer. It just takes on a different form, different shape, depending on the culture. And I don't want to stereotype or overgeneralize too much in that regard. But definitely, like, certain cultures are very, they have their own justifications and explanations of suffering, the concept of suffering. Like, for example, the Buddhist culture, there's an entire philosophy around suffering in Buddhism. Daniel is smiling. He's catching my
we talk about that stuff a lot. Dukkha.
Yeah. Same as look, Western philosophies, and you know, I don't want to drop any names, but some people are into nihilism. Mm-hmm. So like someone like Sartre, John Paul Sartre, for example, that you know, believes that there's no point in living and that you should be suffering anyway, and eventually you will die. It's just a part of life. It's an existential given that life can be quite meaningless. And that's kind of like part of existential therapy. So there are Western philosophies and there are Eastern philosophies involved, depending on the cultural background. So I guess to answer your question, yeah, lots of different guises and lots of different forms that sometimes suffering can be masked or explained away or justified. But grief, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which mental orientation or which philosophical orientation that you subscribe to. Ultimately, if you really want to get well and if you want to process whatever it is that you need to process, obviously, no, that doesn't matter, irrespective of which meaning-making system that you use. Ultimately, you will have to just make sense of that. Like if you're Christian, for example, Christianity, they have an entire culture and a body of work around suffering and around the fall from grace and the human condition and sin, the whole concept of sin.
Original sin, the out from Eden.
Yeah, being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and that's why we all have to suffer, because of that original sin. So you have to kind of work with the client's cultural and religious orientation to make sense of and make meaning. And that's part of trauma processing, is meaning making, just to be able to get through to the other end. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's like, Daniel, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so like, do you start to talk in their language? Like, so you're saying, like, so if like the Christian comes in and they're like, oh, you know, I'm, you know, like, why does it hurt so much? And then you're like, because, you know, Adam ate the apple and now you have to suffer. Like, this is how it works. And like, you know, kind of like accept that and move on.
Well, not so much. So I don't bring that up unless they do. So if that's their way of making meaning or understanding why things are the way they are for them, then obviously I try and work with that. But I don't necessarily preach something. I mean, I'm very secular minded myself, but I'm more than willing to work with the person's cultural system and meaning making system for them to be able to successfully metabolize their pain.
Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of like using their words, speaking their language, but not trying to like reinforce any of the cultural milieu or whatever into them.
Correct.
So I guess you're like, are you like guiding them through the pain, like through that emotional, psychological journey then? And then seeing like you have the landmarks, like you're seeing like these important sort of signs or things showing up as they're going along the journey. And like for you, it's like all those have names, but they're all like, I guess, psychological names, right? Like, you know, whatever the DSM or whatever, whoever the ones that are naming those. And then I guess you're just like translating. It's almost like code switching. Like
yes. Yes, pretty much. And a lot of therapy is actually, you guys will be very surprised or impressed by this. A lot of philosophy goes into therapy. So yeah, we utilize a lot of philosophical approaches and different ways of describing the world. However, I have to say it's a balancing act. So I have to walk a very fine line, because sometimes clients use their own cultural codes and religious meaning-making systems in such a defeating or self-defeating or pathological way to make that trauma narrative or that victim narrative more and more deeply entrenched.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
right. So if God is punishing me, then like I'm just stuck here with God punishing me, and I'm going to my therapist, but you can't help me with that because God's punishing me.
Yes, because I'm a sinful person and I deserve what happened to me. I had a client without obviously keeping people anonymous, so I'll quickly flag this in an anonymous kind of confidential way, but he was sexually abused and assaulted in prison. So he spent some time in prison. He had to do a prison sentence, and whilst he was in custody, he got sexually assaulted to the point where he got permanently impaired, so he could no longer sexually function. And obviously that's devastating. That's really devastating. It's a devastating thing to happen to anybody. Obviously he wouldn't be able to consummate any romantic relationship for the rest of his life. It was that dysfunctional, and his way of rationalizing this, and rationalization, by the way, is actually a defense mechanism. It's not a coping mechanism, but his way of rationalizing this and explaining that away was, it's because I led a promiscuous life before I got into prison, and therefore God is punishing me for my lifestyle, my promiscuous lifestyle, and I accept that punishment, and I just have to live with it for the rest of my life. That I may not be able to have successful relationships or successfully consummate relationships because I'm a sinful person. Do you see where that can go wrong?
Yeah, that feels like almost self-cruelty, like extra self-punishment. Like, yes, the bad thing happened, but if I make it, if I choose the narrative that is inherently self-defeating like that, then it's just like there's extra pain that doesn't go away because I keep reminding myself that this is my pain, which is ouch.
And like that self-blame, it feels like it's almost like pretending to be it's almost like pretending to take back that control, where it's like, oh, these are my decisions, but it's like not really, because they can't actually do anything about that. So it just winds up being this.
Yeah, you're right. And it's incredibly disempowering. And it's a misuse of religion. So, and that's what I mean. That's what I mean by they use religion as a defense mechanism, which can only help you survive to a certain point, but it won't help that person flourish or come to a true acceptance of the trauma that happened and the injury that occurred. So they can, in the future, be able to get into successful relationships with people who can actually well and truly accept them the way they are and just living his best life with the injury that he sustained.
That feels, painful. It makes me worried for the, are there any stories that I am telling that are locking my pain into place? Obviously I don't have such an extreme pain like that, but maybe there is some stories that I'm telling that are like, oh, this is how the world is, or like, I don't have access to their full potential because I'm locked into some story?
Yes, that's a very good question for self-reflection. Limiting beliefs or self-defeating beliefs that we all hold, like really, really deep down subconsciously, that are getting in the way of us reaching our full potential. Good one.
Something I'm curious about, that it was a thread I picked up earlier. You talked about grief and pain, and we've talked about a lot of different like methods to maybe rationalize. You said rationalization is a strategy, like fawn is a strategy. It seems like many of these are like dancing around the thing, like we're trying to catch it from different angles such that we can actually get in. And I have the sense that there is like a specific thing, and this open question, like, is the specific thing always the feeling? And therefore, and we're trying to find a way that we could successfully feel a feeling and process the feeling? Or is the specific thing like sometimes something else, like a sensation or like, is the specific thing sometimes the story, but the story is too scary, and so we have to like dance around the story to get to it? Like, I have a second question of like, is it always a feeling, or is there other things that can be the specific thing? I guess this is like, how do we hold pain in our own experience?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I like the thing. The thing is the thing. What is the thing? You're right. The thing is the feelings. So sometimes, like, I see people who sit down and tell me stories that are devastating, very confronting, so scary, which means that they can hack the narrative and the story, even if it's a horror story, which is often the case. But they are so disconnected from the horror feelings associated with the scary story. And I think that's what Daniel referred to earlier by dissociating. It's kind of like talking about somebody else or narrating a movie that they've seen, except that that movie is actually real. It's happened. It's their life. But they get so disconnected from the emotions that come with that, or attached to that experience. So it's almost as if they sit down and talk about somebody else. That's how, that's the extent that a lot of us are willing to go to, or sometimes we just happen to go to bypass our emotions. So the thing is the feelings. Ultimately, it's accessing the emotions, the feelings attached to our experiences, because they can be scary, they can be painful, and we just don't know how to navigate that.
It's a lot. I'm like, oh, that's a lot.
Therapy. I didn't expect that.
I mean, I don't have a good answer for that. It's just like, oh yeah, that's really hard. That's a lot.
And that's why, look, I keep coming back to the whole idea of pacing. Those small doses, and also always being mindful of the client's threshold for emotional pain, because you don't want to flood them. There is actually something called flooding in therapy, when clients become so flooded and overwhelmed to the point where therapy actually becomes traumatic. So I'm very mindful of that in terms of keeping clients well within their window of tolerance in terms of how much access they can tolerate and how much content they can process before they become dysregulated and therapy becomes destabilizing, and then clients start to decompensate.
I mean, I have the experience of whenever I get overwhelmed of like, I just kind of go blank, which is I trigger this other part of me that is obviously a blanking defense mechanism. And then I just like I don't even know what I want to do here, what I want to work on in therapy. I'm just like, things were too overwhelming. And then I blanked out and like, hello, I'm here, but I have no idea what's what. Yeah.
That's it happens when we get flooded and we become incredibly overwhelmed. So our nervous system, to protect us, goes into shutdown mode because it's just system overload.
Interesting that they're almost opposite, flooding on one side, blinking on the other. Like this is everything and that's nothing, kind of. The panacea for too much is nothing, is like too little. Like the thing that is triggered is its opposite. It's polarity.
Yeah, it seems like the opposite response, but from the brain's perspective and the nervous system's point of view, when you have multiple applications being used at the same time and your processor is not that advanced, then the logical response would be to shut down.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or reboot. And that's why I've seen rebooting happen in real time when, so we reach a certain point in the story or the narrative, and then clients kind of like, you hit the reset point, and so they start repeating and rehashing past details.
Interesting.
Which we've already touched on, but because they're not well equipped or ready to take it a step further, so they reboot. It's fascinating, actually.
It happened to me actually a couple of weeks ago. To like, not to me, to my friend at the. I had to deliver some intense information, and like I knew it was a whole thing, so I tried to set it up as best as possible. But then she like did process it, and then she like reverted back to like her usual stories that she shared.
Yeah.
You said you see the phrase well equipped.
Yeah.
Like when a person is well equipped, they're more able to handle. What is well equipped? Are you like, as you're in therapy, you're trying to give people tools, or like what is that thing that you're do you build it for people, with people, help them be more well equipped?
Yes, 100%. And that speaks to another form of therapy. It's called resource therapy. It's about resourcing clients. So we believe that it's not only about external resources in terms of accessing support and psychoeducation, but it's also about accessing and tapping into internal resources, the most important of which is self-awareness. So gauging your own personal limits in terms of how much you can handle and being in touch and in tune with your own personal responses, that's one of the biggest internal resources that a person can have, because then you become in charge of the process and you can help your therapist pace yourself, and you will know when it gets a bit too much.
It's like
so
self-management. Yep. It's also really important for business and the rest of life as well.
I'd say it's good for productivity too, right? Like, how hard are you working? Are you burning yourself out? Like, oh yeah, you work a lot. You're much less effective at getting things done if you burn yourself out and then crash and then sleep and then take several days off, than if you like stay in the window of capacity and like work along gradually over time.
100%. Yeah.
How does one teach the skill? Like, is it just sort of trial and error? It's like noticing, hey, you're noticing that you're starting to dysregulate, so I'm going to point it out before that happens. And then I guess they start to get a sense of that as well, because then like they're getting awareness of these like inflection points almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And dysregulation can look differently to different people. So if I start becoming heightened, then I'll know what that looks like. I'll know it in my body. I can connect now to myself. I feel safe enough to be able to feel things. This is an area that I kind of explored a bit with Elliot when I was going through a health crisis at a certain point last year, but I'm not going to really delve into that. But definitely just being able to tune into yourself, trace different physical sensations and how your body is responding. I think that will give you a wealth of information in terms of how you're handling things. And also another resource or internal resource is, how can you self-soothe through distress when you're distraught, so you actually don't reach that point of burning out. So how can I comfort myself? How can I soothe myself? How can I regulate my own emotions if I'm feeling a little bit in disarray?
Yeah, I use this for parenting. I've got a 1-year-old, and I love that face. It's such a
I wouldn't have guessed, but yes, please.
And so I have been like trying to teach him how to self-regulate as much as possible.
Yes.
Which I can't really do because he doesn't understand words so well yet. But he does, like, even like just giving him that time, like when I'm starting to feel like I can feel it where he starts, like he's going to start to spiral, or he's going to start to dysregulate, and just slowing down. And like, or when he is dysregulated, like sitting with that with him without like distracting or without anything, just you're experiencing things now and that's okay. And but like also like giving those experiences the space to, it's like almost thingifying it, where it's like making it a thing, or like this is important part of life too, right? Like even though it's like very ineffable and like hard to, like it's very hard to grasp your emotions, or it's hard to like grasp like starting to dysregulate, like it's like it's barely a thing, but it's super important.
Oh, this is brilliant. Before it becomes a full-blown tantrum, this is actually, self-soothing is actually something that needs to be taught in infancy and in childhood. Man, you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
I'm really interested in
seriously.
He's got really secure attachment, like he'll just go hang out with other people.
That's terrific. That's brilliant.
I'm super interested in there's a thread of object permanence.
Yes.
The phenomena that like little kids will not remember. It's the why you can play peekaboo with the kid. Like you can hide behind an object and they'll be surprised when you come out, because they're not necessarily certain that you were still there, because they maybe the memory. But then making things into object and then relating to them, like physical objects is fine, but what we're talking about is subtle objects, right? The subtle object of beginning to dysregulate, like that's a really hard thing to grasp. Like even for adults, plenty of adults don't know when they're dysregulated. They're just grumpy or something, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, I'm actually hungry. Like my dysregulation was hungry, but it was coming out as grumpiness, and I hadn't noticed for the last 3 hours I've been grumpy at everyone, and no one was like, are you hungry? like it takes a lot of skill to be able to grasp the shape of and get a handle on the shape of some of these internal phenomena, like the dysregulation or the I suspect that we have like a set of like almost showstopper phenomena. Like the thing about blankness is that's also grabbable, and you can get a handle on it and like be like, oh, this is the blank thing. I'm now holding it. I'm gonna like deliberately put it down, but you can't do that if you're just like in blankness, right? Same goes for like the quality, like I don't know. Like many people answer, like you ask a hard question, they're like, I don't know. Like, but that's actually another object. You can grab that one and also put that down and look at what's behind that. Well, if I did know, then blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of our mental capacity is filled with these objects that don't look like objects. Yeah. Like dysregulation. Like, oh, once I can grab dysregulation and have a relationship with it, I can transform it or do something with it, as long as I have enough time or space or whatever. I can start to work with it. But it's these ones that blindside us. Like even like too much fear can just be like, I'm just too much in fear and I don't know what to do. And then, oh wait, that's fear. I'm gonna like, now I realize I'm in fear. I'm gonna downregulate. I'm gonna relax myself. I'm gonna be like, what do I actually want? But the recognition, that first moment of like being able to grasp, is very difficult.
And this is why I think that's why I said the work that Daniel is doing with his son, did you say, Daniel?
Yeah, son.
Is absolutely crucial, because it's mindfulness of emotion. So Daniel is actually teaching his son to be mindful of whatever he's feeling in the moment when he's experiencing distress. You're naming it, you're helping him name it. So are you frustrated? Are you sad? Are you angry?
I don't do the labels yet, because I don't think he's really developed like those emotions. Like the thing you're kind of pointing to is saying like these are a little more sophisticated than where he's at. It's really like it's like when he was born, he had like, the infants have startle reflex, right? So they're like there, and then they just like freak out, and they're crying, and then they're this, and they're right. It's like that's why you swaddle them, so that their nervous system gets very activated.
Yeah.
It's literally, I think it's just SNS system, and like just on or off, on or off, on or off.
Yeah.
And like I've noticed that evolution of like, that's where he started, and then like he's like building these more sophisticated, like what we call like emotions, right, which are more, they're much more complex, but they're also tend to be like less, like they're almost not as powerful as like, it's like almost like just like a full seizure or like limp, but like all emotional spaces in between that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not exactly naming it yet, but we will be when, as we go through, as he starts to
develop it, depending on the developmental stage. Then I guess the most powerful gift that you can actually give him right now is your nervous system, because that's co-regulation.
It's just training the nervous system to be appropriate, which is something you were talking about as well, where you're training that nervous system, right? Like as part of the trauma
resource therapy.
Yes. And our nervous system is another external resource, because it's about co-regulation. So if I stay regulated and calm and in my window of tolerance, that will by proxy help other people who are dysregulated to also calm down and get a bit closer, or shift a bit closer to their window of tolerance, much like you're doing with your son right now on a very primal physiological level.
It's so interesting, because like I didn't really get that before I had a kid, but now like seeing just like the way people, I've been calling it like auras, where it's just the way people hold themselves, and how easy it is to like trigger a response, like a quick response from them. So some people, it's like they're just like solid, and like it doesn't really matter what happens, like they're not going to physically react. And that feels very calming, and like just all the tension just drops. And so I find so much of like making my job as a parent easy is to just keep it like low, like keep it calm. And then he's gonna go do whatever crazy shit he does, right? Because that's his job, right? Is to go and explore and try all these things. But it like kind of like it biases everything towards the world is safe and okay, and I don't need to like freak out, right? Even though he will, like when he he'll fall and he'll cry and all that stuff, but it's just like I find with me, or like if there's certain other people that are more high tension, like he's more likely to injure himself, or he's more likely to dysregulate than when it's just me and him, or me and other calm people as well.
And that's how you can have that effect on it.
But that's so hard, like to do. Like I have to do so much work to just stay calm and like deal with everything. You deal with things as it comes up. Like don't borrow trouble. Like the future. Like apparently, parents are like almost that people think it's their job to worry about the future and make all the things that are all the bad possibilities, like make them exist now in everybody's mind, very salient. And like it's like no, you gotta be calm and make good decisions, or else everything's just so much harder. Like you're just working against yourself, and it becomes impossible and just overwhelmed, and then you don't do a good job, and that's where mistakes happen.
Parenting, I gotta give it to you, parenting is a tough gig for so many different reasons. Sometimes you got to take it on a day-by-day basis, sometimes even on an hourly basis, just surviving the hour and just getting through the day. But it sounds like you got all the right ideas.
What's happening now?
Exactly. In the here and now, that's all you can do.
I
kind of have a vision, but still sometimes it's about just getting through the day.
Kind of want to give a voice to the flip side and be like, being a 1-year-old is a tough gig as well.
Everything is so new. You're discovering your limbs.
Don't understand anything about how the world works.
Fresh eyes.
And like he's like progressing like to the point where there's like, it used to be very much physical control, where I wouldn't let him into anywhere dangerous, and now it's like more psychological, where we're gonna go do dangerous as in like the toilet or something, right? Not like knives, but you're right. And then like having like being able to like have that interaction with him where I'm like, no, like not that, and then him figuring out all this stuff, figuring out like how to live life, how to navigate the world. And like I can't explain to many of these like higher level concepts of, you know, like germ theory or anything. Like he's not gonna get it, but like I'm having to use like all these like psychological I don't want to say manipulations because it doesn't sound but like the psychological language, I think.
I can just I can picture Daniel sitting with his son, and he's trying to explain all of these abstract concepts, and he's like staring at him. Dad, why are you doing this to me? Can we go back to playing now, please?
Time to do your times tables. 1 times 1 is 1.
No, he's picking up words, and it's just this whole other world that I like kind of forgot about, of like you can interact with people and not talk to them and still like you can still communicate, and you're still like there's still all this information. Like you were saying earlier, like what is it, 97% of information is not, or whatever the number is not verbal.
Yeah.
And like it's like I didn't believe it until I had to live that way.
Yeah.
I want to ask questions about that, the like non-verbal side of sitting in the room with a client. Like what can you talk about that? Like what's going on for you, ignoring the word bit? They're telling stories, they're like doing stuff. What's going on for you non-verbally as you sit with someone?
This is such a fascinating phenomenon. Phenomenon, actually, because
that's why I want to go there.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've experienced moments of profound joy, you know, and moments of profound sadness, and pain. And that's when you go speechless. Actually, you know, you feel like your word selection or your choice in vocabulary it detracts, it doesn't add to the experience in that space. So you kind of like, I don't say anything, and I just sit in that moment and I just let it happen. And that's when they pause. Sometimes they just go silent, and we have all those moments of silent reflection, and it's incredible, and it's absolutely transformative. I'm not trying to glamorize this in any way or over exaggerate, but sometimes it's indescribable, Elliot. Like literally, I can be bilingual, but I feel short of words in terms of capturing the level of sadness or the level of joy or the level of gratitude that we both feel. And at points I noticed that my eyes actually well up, so I don't stop myself from crying, because it's so moving. And that's why this kind of work is very transformative, not just for clients but also for therapists, when you're open enough to experience or allow yourself to experience that. And it's actually when we don't talk, that's when we allow the experience to change us, by just being present in that and accessing that and just relishing in whatever is happening. So I don't think you need words to be able to tap into joy. So if Daniel is playing with his son and kids are very joyful and you're having this joyful moment, you don't have to talk about it. You can just be in it. You can just live it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. God, that was cool. I'm just remembering some of these moments, and yeah, it just took me to a different space. So it's hard to capture and it's hard to describe, but it happens and it's very, very transformative.
Yeah, it feels very powerful to have you talking about them here. Feels very powerful.
Yeah, like I'm definitely feeling things now, I guess, with us that I wouldn't necessarily want to put to words, but to experience it together.
Yeah. You guys, this has been amazing. Thank you for the opportunity and the chance to explore things with you. This has been I'm having a ball. I've had a ball.
Psychotechnologies live.